How goes it, everybody? Welcome to the latest season of Mystery Ghost Stories. 2 weeks ago, I said I would return, and here I am. Mystery Ghost Stories will kick off this season with a very familiar location. In fact, it's right behind me. I am, of course, referring to the Stanley Hotel, which inspired The Shining. But we're not going to be talking about The Shining as much as I would love to, and I could talk to your head off about The Shining all freaking night, because I really could. But no, we're actually going to talk about the hauntings at the Stanley Hotel. Little background for you. As I just said, the Stanley Hotel is in Estes Park, Colorado, and it is the inspiration for Stephen King's novel, The Shining. Him and his wife Tabitha stayed there when everybody else was leaving because they were entering the winter season, kind of just like at The Shining. And while staying there, in room 217, where Stephen King stayed, he experienced many paranormal things. But apparently, he wasn't the only person to experience things in 217. I'm trying my best to make sure that this is not crooked and that I'm not going back and forth, but I'm going to have to. I'm not a professional by any means. I say this all the time, but it needs to be said. So I'm trying my best here. All right. So here we go. Mystery Ghost Stories. The hauntings of the Stanley Hotel. Today, the Stanley Hotel is a large, stately lodge that overlooks the mountain town of Estes Park. But before the hotel and town were established here, Estes Valley was an idyllic landscape, replete with mountain streams and meadows that Ute and Arapaho tribes called home, according to the hotel website. I apologize. I'm on this website and there's 3 different ads which are obstructing my view. Thank you. Another freaking ad. The Stanley Hotel's origin story began when inventor Freeland Oscar Stanley, stricken with tuberculosis, traveled to the valley in hopes of getting their health back. Getting his health back. I'm not sure why it says there. That's really weird, considering this was early 1900s. Some tell this part of the hotel's origin story differently and claim that Stanley was so ill that he was convinced he died from the consumption and was intent on doing it in a beautiful place. But after just one summer, his health was indeed restored, which he credited to the fresh air and abundant sunshine. Along with his wife Flora, Stanley made plans to build a large hotel in Estes Valley that would feature the grandeur and Edwardian affluence of the East Coast establishments, but in a rustic Western setting. When the hotel opened in 1909, guests marveled at the palatial structure in front of them. It was surrounded by wilderness, but somehow featured electricity, telephones, modern bathrooms, and a maid and cooking staff in professional uniforms. For decades, the Stanley was seen as a posh, exclusive Mountain West destination that provided a restful, rejuvenating break for busy East Coast lifestyles. But by the 1970s, the hotel had fallen into grave disrepair due to the years of neglect and lack of investment, and had become a shell of its former self. The Stanley easily could have been demolished, had it not been for a bizarre and faithful string of occurrences involving a now seminal author and his famous nightmare that took place in room 217. In the 1970s, author Stephen King was working on The Stand and living in Boulder, Colorado. One weekend, he and his wife Tabitha traveled an hour north to Estes Park for a weekend away from their children. In a recent interview, The View, King explained that the Stanley Hotel was open on its last day for the season, when he and Tabitha arrived looking for accommodations. They would be the only guests in the large hotel that night, and King recalled hearing the wind whistling outside the room. After a night at the restaurant and bar, the couple retired to room 217. In a lucid nightmare, the author dreamed of a Kool-Aid fire hose coming to life and chasing his screaming son as he ran down the halls of the hotel. It is worth noting that in the novel of The Shining, Danny comes across the fire hose, and also in the miniseries of 1997 on Sci-Fi, in The Shining, the fire hose is seen attacking Danny. It does not appear in the 1981 adaptation film. After walking in a panic, King lit a cigarette and stared out the window. By the time he had finished the cigarette and had gone back to bed, the rough outline of The Shining was fully formed in his mind. It's also worth noting that, according to another article, King's wife, Tabitha, retired for the night, and King went down to the bar. Now, mind you, this is the last day that they're open. So King went to the bar, and he was greeted by a bartender by the name of Grady, which I found interesting. The Stanley's connection to King and the terrifying night that inspired The Shining are the hotel's most famous and influential creepy occurrence. But strange and reportedly paranormal happenings had been reported in the hotel long before the 1970s, some specifically in room 217. Take the night on June 25th, 1911. After the valley experienced a flood, the 2-year-old hotel's power went out for the first time. Freeland Stanley took it upon himself to install a gas lantern in each room to provide a gas with a light, and a leak caused a buildup of gas to form in room 217. The head chambermaid, Elizabeth Wilson, entered the room with a lit candle and set off a massive explosion. Wilson miraculously survived and was launched from the room's entrance to the dining hall located on the first floor. An estimated 10% of the hotel wasn't as lucky, and one observer reported seeing a bathtub fly up in the air during the blast. After waking up from a coma, Wilson returned to work in 1913 and remained employed by the hotel until 1950. So that's a pretty miraculous story in itself. Nothing creepy behind it, but simply the fact that the woman, experienced a fire in the hotel, was in a coma for like a year and a half, goes back to work willingly, and then works at the hotel for like the rest of her natural born life. Did she willingly go back, or did the hotel tell her to come back? This is where Wilson's story should end, but it doesn't. According to some hotel guests and staff, her spirit is said to still inhabit room 217, but reports claim that she's typically more helpful than scary. Guests have shared stories of waking up to a room that was tidier than the night before, with their clothes folded and suitcases organized. When I originally heard about Stephen King staying here, throughout the years, I've heard several stories, all the same, that Stephen King himself had actually gone into the room, and his suitcase, he left it on the bed. And him and Tabitha went down, to talk with the people, to do some other things throughout their day. They came back into the room. Tabitha was in the main room. Stephen King goes into the bedroom, and he's going to go take his clothes out, and he finds that his clothes aren't even in his suitcase anymore, but all folded, tucked neatly in the hotel drawers. One couple told a staff member of the Stanley that their bed was made around them during the night with them still inside. Can you imagine? But take note, if you're considering staying in this famous hotel and aren't married, you may not have the most restful night if you choose to stay in room 217. Unmarried couples have reported a chilling presence settling into the bed with them as they've slept. That's creepy. I apologize. It's just completely froze on me. Stanley died in 1940. One moment. This is embarrassing. The whole thing just completely froze on me. That was really bizarre. Let's try this again. Okay. Stanley died in 1940 at the age of 91, but like Wilson, many believe his presence can still be seen and felt at the hotel, mainly at the bar and in the billiard room. The phantom of his wife, Flora, has a penchant for tinkering around the hotel's piano, according to multiple accounts. Some hotel tour guides believe a ghost of a child with autism wanders the property and plays with guests' hair. Guests on the fourth floor of the Stanley Hotel have shared stories of hearing children's laughter in the hall with no one to be found. So I found it interesting how they said the fourth floor of the Stanley, because if you remember in The Shining, how many floor you don't really get the number of how many floors are in the Overlook. I've always believed it to be three, I guess, if you count the lobby, the stairwell, and then the place that they stay, I believe, is on the third floor. So this is saying there's a fourth floor. I guess it doesn't matter, but Rachel Thomas, a tour supervisor for the Stanley Hotel, claimed she was mysteriously made ill on this floor in a 2021 interview. Creepy happenings like these have made the hotel an internationally famous hotspot for supposed hauntings, and has been featured on the popular ghost-themed shows like Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters. So I remember when Ghost Hunters did it, like the first time, we're talking like 2006, 2007, and then they just turned it into like this parade. It was like, oh, it's a special episode. And it wasn't really a special episode. It was like they did it all night long. Only, you know, they pretty much just showed you what they do throughout the night for an entire show. They just dragged it out. And then I remember like years later they kept going back to the Stanley, and it's like, okay, I get what you're trying to do, but if you didn't really find anything the first time, which I don't think they did, you're not going to find anything the next three times you go. In Ghost Adventures, I can't stand that show because of the host, but Zach Baggins. I know some people probably watch that show and love that guy, but he's an idiot to me. Can't take him seriously. And I can only imagine what they found. Anyways, whether ghosts exist or if life after death is real or not is not something we're equipped to meaningfully. Whether ghosts exist or if life after death is real or not is not something we're equipped to meaningfully address or answer in this short article. But we can tell you that with 100% certainty that the Stanley Hotel has a couple of decidedly creepy locations. Wow, is that a hard read? Jesus. These include on-site pets. Let's try this again. These include an on-site pet cemetery where some of the owner's animals have been laid to rest over the years. Pardon my French, but fuck this article. As if the ads in the beginning weren't enough, it just timed out on me. Now I have to scroll all the way down. Hey, I never said I was a professional, so most people would probably cut this out of their videos, but I don't know how to do that, so. Okay, these include an on-site pet cemetery where some of the owners have animals have been laid to rest over the years. First of all, isn't it ironic that Stephen King stayed here and inspired The Shining, and the place just also happens to have a pet cemetery? You know, another book written by Stephen King. Like, what the hell is that about? Did that inspire Pet Cemetery? Holy crap. Cassie, a friendly golden retriever, is said to still deliver newspapers and scratch at the doors to be let in from the outside, despite being buried at the grounds. Excuse me. Plus a large cave system that's located under the hotel. Why would a hotel need a network of caves, you ask? The reason is that in the early days of the Stanley, it was seen as unprofessional for the staff to be seen by guests, so employees used the underground pathways to travel between rooms and the hotel's bar, restaurant, and laundry facilities. Basically, that's where Disney, I imagine, got their whole idea. If you ever go to Disney World or Disneyland, whichever one you go to, you're not supposed to see the staff, and you don't see the staff. And this is why, because Disney's designed in such a way that there's like little tunnels like behind all the setups. Sorry, sorry, Instagram. There's a bunch of like tunnels and stuff in places hidden behind all like the vendors, all the rides and stuff. And this is because they don't want you to see the people that work there. The ghost of a pastry chef is said to haunt the caves, as evidenced by the alluring and inexplicable scent of baked goods that are frequently reported there. Imagine smelling baked goods, but it's not actually baked goods, it's just ghostly baked goods, I suppose. God, that would irritate me. Room 401, not 217, is, according to some, the creepiest room in the hotel. It is thought to be haunted by an unfriendly male ghost by some accounts. Women have claimed that they were inappropriately touched by an unknown presence while standing in the room's closet. I wonder how well that room went during the Me Too movement. It's a really bad joke. You don't have to laugh, but don't scold me either. One man claims he witnessed his wedding ring inexplicably move from the bathroom counter and fall down the drain of the sink in the bathroom. That just sounds like clumsiness on his part. Down the hall in down the hall in room 407, multiple guests have reported the odd experience of being tucked into bed by some invisible force, and others have felt someone sit at the foot of their bed, only to find nothing there but an indentation on the covers where they switched on the light. That would creep me out. Yeah, that would creep me out. In room 428, some have seen the vision of a cowboy looming over the bed as they slept, or standing in the corner. They aren't, there aren't any rooms above this room, yet over the years there have been multiple reports of strange sounds like furniture being moved and footsteps emanating from the ceiling. Seeing a cowboy? The ghost of a cowboy sounds cool. But if I'm staying in a hotel room and I wake up in the middle of the night and I see a cowboy standing in the goddamn corner, I'm sorry, partner, but no. You need to make haste and get out of Dodge. And by Dodge, I mean my room. Stat. Even without its paranormal reputation, the Stanley Hotel is a beautiful, fascinating place to visit. But with the potential to experience a haunting firsthand, guests from the world often travel here in hopes of witnessing something profound and unexplainable. So there we go. the hauntings of the Stanley Hotel. Now, if you remember how Mystery Ghost Stories works compared to Mystery Unsolved, I don't give you theories. I just tell you the story, and we both hear it, and I give my thoughts on it. To be completely honest, I don't buy all of it. I think some of it's legit. The maid that worked there for over 40 years, she's still there. She's putting people's clothes away. She's tucking people into bed. Absolutely. I would also go as far to say, like, if you're not a married couple and you stay in there, she's probably like looking at you as, because that was like frowned upon back in her day. I don't know if I believe that Stanley himself is there. I don't know. That just seems very contrived to me. It just seems like that's always the case. Like, oh, like the Winchester. Like Sarah Winchester. Yeah, absolutely, she's still there. But like, oh, the husband, people have seen John Winchester. Like, no, you haven't. Or whatever his name was. It's like almost every place that which hauntings are, people are like, oh, the owner's there. Which would make sense, but to me, it doesn't always have to be the case. And I don't know, I just don't buy into the whole fact that Freeland Stanley himself is haunting the place. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'd have to go and experience it for myself. Which I have not, which I know is weird, coming from me, the lover of The Shining over here. Honestly, if I went to any place to get the feel of The Shining, I would not go to the Stanley first. There's actually a place in California, and the interior, it's been like the same. It's the same interior for the last 40 years, and that is what inspired one of the rooms for The Shining for Stanley Kubrick. So I would go there before I go to the Stanley. Anyway, ghost golden retrievers. No, I don't. It's a fun story, but I just don't buy that one. Room 217 being the most haunted, probably by the maid, Mrs. Wilson. I buy that. Also, I find it intriguing that the fourth floor, room 407, 417, and I believe 428, no, 407. I think I said that. Anyway, there's 3 rooms on the 4th floor, all haunted. Totally buy that. The Ghost Cowboy, that one throws me. And also, probably a little creepy when you consider the fact that, like, oh, I hear creaking floorboards and the moving of furniture upstairs from me. Sir, you're on the last floor. There's nothing above you. What do you mean? Like, there's not even an attic, right? Because it's a hotel. Why would they need an attic? So that's creepy. So overall, the Stanley Hotel does apparently have hauntings. I would imagine, based off of my personal opinion, that there probably was a lot of hauntings, but they probably didn't know about them until Stephen King stayed there. That's quite evident. In other words, they were ready to just demolish the place. Stephen King stays there, puts that place back on the map, tells people his experiences there. So people naturally, from the greatest horror author of all time, well, we got to go to the Stanley ourselves. We got to experience this. And they have. And I imagine the people that work there, and maybe even the people in Estes Park, Colorado, would probably be like, you know what, let's look into the history of this place. And sure enough, they find out that there's people here, there's hauntings, and they themselves start experiencing stuff. Do I think the Stanley Hotel is haunted? Yes, I just pretty much said that without saying it. I do hope you enjoyed this season premiere episode of Mystery Ghost Stories, and do be sure to check out next Friday's episode. I would love to tell you, but I don't remember. But that's not even the reason I want to tell you. The reason I don't want to tell you, it's because it'd be better as a mystery itself. For Mystery Ghost Stories, this is Justin Bienvenue. Have a good night.